Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I'm going to be doing a training game, the fifth training game, and I'm in the mood to play some really solid chess. So hopefully we don't muck it all up right from the outset. I'm looking for a longer game, so settle in, get comfortable, do whatever you need to do. When I find an opponent, I will come back and start the video. So we'll see you in a moment. All right. Well, we've got a game. We're playing against a 17-14. I've started with e4. He's played e5. And I'm going to keep this in familiar territory. Knight f3. Okay. He's played the knight to... I'm going to go for a Sicilian. Sorry, not a Sicilian, an Italian. And just keep things very, very simple. I'm going to see if we can get into focus mode here. Improve the screen a little bit. All right. Now, what's important to note here, as far as I'm concerned, is there's no rush. I've got 47 and a half minutes on the clock, 45 seconds for every additional move. I'm playing someone who is higher rated than me, and I'm out for victory today. I'm not interested in a draw. I want to absolutely crush. So let's play really strong chess. That's the goal. All right, so he's developed his knight. I don't know if there's any tricks in this particular line that I would need to be careful of. So I'm going to just take my time in terms of figuring everything out. What I can see so far is that he's ready to castle. I'm ready to castle. We both have very active bishops. His bishop looks at this square. So when I castle, this pawn will actually be pinned. Similarly, my bishop looks at this square. So when he castles, the pawn will be pinned. So there's a degree of symmetry in that regard, but there's also some asymmetry in the position. And the asymmetry in the position arises from the fact that my bishop is currently blocked in by the pawn. Well, it's outside of the pawn chain, but it's blocked in the sense that if he were to attack the bishop, it's got nowhere to escape to. It can only choose where it wants to get captured. Sure, I could come here, but then there's this. And then from here, there's this, which again pushes me back here. So whereas his bishop is currently safe. So if I want to preserve my bishop, then there could be an argument for playing a move like a3 in this position. To preserve my active bishop, put the ball in his court. If he castles, I can castle if I wish. And that's certainly a possibility. I have to be aware that he might try and play in a sort of reverse fried liver kind of a way and attack this pawn. But I believe in that scenario, castling should be a more than adequate response. So a3 is the first candidate move that's coming to mind here. h3 is a candidate move, just preventing his knight or bishop from ever using that square. But I think it's an unnecessary move at this point in time. And I'm also wondering whether I can have a sacrifice here already. If I take this pawn, he takes with the king. I take this pawn, he takes with the knight. I've won 2 pawns, but I've given up 2 pieces. I can play this move, possibly winning back 1 piece, but losing another pawn, if not 2 pawns in so doing. So I don't think that works. There is this move as well to consider, immediately attacking this pawn. He doesn't have a bishop that can defend, but what he can do is he can just castle. And in that scenario, I'm not sure that I have much of a follow-up. I suppose I could play f4 in that circumstance, but with my king in the center, I'm not sure how much I like that. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to play a3. Another thing I could consider is developing the knight, but I'm not too sure where I want the knight. So I'm actually going to start with a3. I want to preserve this bishop. It gathers a little bit of space on the queen side. And it essentially just means that I'm not committing to anything yet necessarily. So it's a bit of a flexible way to play, I think. It may have allowed him the opportunity to play d5. I could take, but I think, I wouldn't mind actually controlling d5 a little bit better. And now I can stick my knight here and I don't have to worry about it getting pinned by his bishop. So I can stick a knight here to influence d5, prevent him from getting d5 himself, because then I could take and I'd have that square amply defended. So I think I really like the look of just d5. Knight c3 to prevent d5. And then if he does play something like d6, I could consider going after his bishop. And that's interesting. So I'm going to do that. I don't think I need to spend a whole bunch of time on that particular move. I think we're developing in a nice way. I know I haven't castled yet, but I'm ready to castle if I wish. And I'm preventing him from having very easy development. I'm preserving my bishop. And the bishop pair could be an advantage worth striving for. Okay, he's still yet to develop his light squared bishop. It's going to take him a move to prepare that, but at the same time, I'm still yet to castle. So it's pretty even. I like my position so far. Of course, it would be nice to learn more of the theory of the Italian game and to know what really is the book response after d3 and knight f6. Is there any tricks to be aware of? Okay, and he opts actually to prevent my bishop from coming out here, which is interesting because since I can't come there and I also can't come here, the only most active square would be here, which gives him a chance to trade bishops. And I don't mind this because it does open the F file. It does open the F file, and it also just puts a pawn where it can control d4 rather nicely. So this is certainly an option, but it also gives me the option to attack this bishop again. The thing about attacking the bishop immediately is he could always retreat over here and just leave my knight on the side of the board. I suppose then I can develop my bishop to a more active square where it's no longer opposed by his bishop. But I'm getting the feeling that maybe I should just castle here. Perhaps just castling here presents me with really everything I need in the position. Another opportunity, since he's moved a pawn near his king, I've moved a pawn near this side of the board too. But if I were to try and arrange opposite sides castling, that could be interesting. Now, since we're trying to win, we have to imagine moves that we wouldn't normally play. And looks crazy, but I wonder what happens if I take the pawn and open up the king. Is there a follow-up there? And I would suggest there's probably not. But what about a move even like knight h4 here? Knight h4, and the point is I'm looking for this move. Because then there would be take, and if he takes back, I would like to say that there's check, but there's never check there with the queen as long as the knight defends that square. So I'd have to find a way to get rid of this knight, which leads me to this move as a possibility. What if I immediately jump up here and challenge this knight? I mean, that could certainly be interesting. That could absolutely be an interesting way to play. Now, I could wait. I'm pretty sure he would play this on his next move, and then I can challenge the knight. But could I also do it straight away? Could I do it straight away? Had a little disruption there. So let's get back into the mind frame. So I am considering whether I can castle. Sure, I can castle, but I'm wondering, would it be better to actually play this move? According to opening principles, you shouldn't move the same piece twice in the opening. So the principled move would be to castle instead. So by default, I'm leaning towards castles, unless there's a concrete reason to play this move. Now, the concrete reason would be to get rid of this knight so that one day I could land my queen here. An issue with that is I still can't land my queen there if he ever plays this move because of the way that his bishop will control that square anyway. Because of that, I might be better off aiming to get my queen here and then over to here if I were wanting to attack down that file. And to do that, maybe even queen e2 could be a nice move. Preparing bishop e3. Then if he takes, I could take back with the queen. Potentially at one day preparing to get the queen over here. That's a very long-term plan. It's a possible move, absolutely. It's absolutely possible. But let's see what else there is, because we have time. There's b4 to attack this bishop. And I believe he would be mad. Well, not mad, but I believe it would be wrong for him to take either with the bishop or with the knight, because he would simply be losing material there and there's not enough compensation. So this move in and of itself should force his bishop back, at which point I could then plant my knight here, threatening to take his bishop, as well as threatening to take the knight. He could trade in that scenario. But yeah, it's an interesting one, just to grab some space and push him back, possibly allow development of my bishop onto b2, where I might have a little bit of pressure on that b2 square. So he would have to probably play something like rook e8 or pawn d6, which are both moves he's probably considering playing anyway. If I castle and he plays a5, preventing me from playing b4, would I be upset about that? I wouldn't necessarily be upset. However, it'd be a nice move for him to be able to sort of somewhat protect his bishop. So I can go after the bishop like this. Okay, and I can win that bishop. And that could be an advantageous way to play. Attack the bishop. If he plays back, well, then it's not a problem for me. I can develop my bishop to an active square. That's a very active way to play. And you know what? We're out for blood. I'm out for blood tonight. So I'm going to attack that bishop. I'm going to play aggressively. Okay, I'm going to play aggressively. I have the option of going to b2 with my bishop and just taking residence on this long diagonal. If he plays his bishop back to b6, I have the option to attack that bishop in a way where I guarantee that I'm going to win the bishop for the knight, thus securing the bishop pair, which is an advantage. It's an advantage to have the bishop pair, particularly in an open position. And this position is open enough at the moment and has the potential to become more open. So I think that's something I can do. I can always castle after that. I'm ready to castle if I wish. Okay, so the question is, if he comes here and I play this, what's his follow-up? I guess he can probably play d6 and just let me take, open up the file for his rook, and argue that this pawn's always going to be weak. That in itself can be an argument to put the bishop on b2. It could be an argument to put the bishop on b2. So that the pawn remains defended for all time. But it's not clear. I might want to sacrifice the bishop for this pawn at an opportune moment. Or I might want this bishop to defend f4 at a certain time. So potentially I can leave this bishop here and play on the queen side, push this pawn further forward. You know, but we would have to see. So the other move he could consider is, I suppose he could consider this move, although he probably wouldn't play it because of the way that it blocks his pawn. So I think he's more likely to play this, but then that blocks his bishop, his rook from being able to defend this square. So I think this is most likely. I guess the other possibility is a counterattack against my bishop, but there's no way for him to pull that off because I have the d5 square adequately controlled. I have the b5 square adequately controlled. Perhaps a move like this might have been an idea, except he can't play that anymore, so my bishop's fine. Any other counter-attacking possibilities? Yeah, I was just looking at this move. That's a possibility, and I'm actually not unhappy to see that because I no longer need to actually go and hunt down the bishop. It's actually come to me, and I wasn't too happy with this knight in a way being directly in front of the f-pawn. So the question now becomes, do I just take the bishop? This knight is, of course, undefended and pinned. I can't move it away necessarily. Maybe I can. But if I do move it away, he's threatening to take the rook. I can take this knight with check. He could take back. But I don't really like the way that looks on the whole. So probably taking the bishop is nice. He's got two ways to recapture, so we can calculate both. Let's first see what happens if he takes with the knight. If he takes with the knight, I can immediately maneuver this knight over to here, where I challenge the knight immediately. And I can take it back, and eventually he can have a pawn here. That's true, but I will be able to attack that pawn from afar, and I've won the bishop pair. Alternatively, you can take with a pawn and thereby move my knight out of its current setting. And my knight has a few different options of where it might wish to go. As mentioned earlier, I could come up here and challenge this knight immediately. If he takes, I can take back. And that move could be nice. Or if I take and he takes with the pawn, I can come over here, putting some pressure on the pawn, also preparing f4 in several different ways. And I think I don't mind either of those. So I will take the bishop, securing the bishop pair, which in a large way, that was the idea behind b4, was to secure the bishop pair. So I'm going to say job done in that regard. And we'll see which way he recaptures and respond accordingly. Okay, I would imagine he's going to take with the knight to free up his pawns. And also just to set a knight on a nice square. But as mentioned, I can immediately challenge the knight, which is what I will do. And there's no essential need for me to castle immediately. He would need another move before he's able to free up the bishop. And even when he does, there's no effective pins because I would always have f3 available to me. So I'm not particularly afraid. And like I said, if he takes with the pawn, I probably will play the same move. Putting pressure on the pawn, which can be followed up with bishop b2. And it actually would be hard for him to defend that pawn as far as I can tell. Because I could also, from here, if I didn't want to play bishop b2 or even in conjunction with bishop b2, I could either attack this knight, get it to move away so that he loses contact with the pawn. That's a possibility, although it creates extra weaknesses that I would have to consider. So we're going to see how he proceeds. He takes with the knight. So my understanding here was that I'm going to play knight to e2 and challenge the knight immediately, though that's not 100% essential by any stretch of the imagination. I don't believe it's a bad idea. Okay. So if I do this and he takes, well, then I get to take with my queen. I'm not unhappy about that. There's no real reason to be unhappy about that. Another possibility would be to develop my bishop out here. Threatening to take, he takes back with the pawn. Then I come here, hitting the pawn. And that pawn could actually be very difficult for him to defend. I mean, there's moves like this, but I could take that. So he would then have check. And this is where it becomes important to potentially castle. So I'm wondering here if I should castle first. Okay, so is there anything that he can actually do threatening me at the moment? I don't think so. This move just to get rid of the knight could be very nice. Just get rid of the knight. If he takes, I take back with the queen. and life is pretty good. Castling, though, also seems very, very sensible. Castling gives him a chance to play d6. Then I can still come back and attack this knight. Not a problem. Not a problem. Castling, is there anything else to worry about? Like if I bring the knight back, can he play this move? And would I be worried about that move? My immediate feeling is I'm not worried about that move at all because I simply take his knight. And if he takes back, I take the other knight. So he can't. I think this is relatively safe. It's an undefended knight versus a strong knight. So I think I should be happy for the trade. It also enables the bishop to come to a nice long diagonal. I'm still able to castle and there's no urgent need to do so. I have given up a bit of control over d5 though, and I didn't actually consider that at the time. So maybe he can play d5 now. Which in and of itself isn't the end of the world at all, because I can still just take. He would have to take back with his knight. I can take, he takes, and then I continue on my way, either castling or attacking the pawn. But d5 is probably what I would expect, possibly just d6. I don't expect him to trade the knights. I expect him to try and hold on to the knights. So after this move, should I take with the bishop? I would say not. Should I potentially take, and after he takes back, immediately put my bishop here? And I think that could be a nice move to prevent this bishop, this knight, from ever attacking the queen. We wouldn't want that because it would be attacking both the queen and the knight. And we would have to move the queen somewhere. So yeah, very true. So d5, we capture. He takes back. We put a bishop here. Important. Then we are attacking this knight a couple of times. Okay, he might move this knight then over here potentially, but that wouldn't be bad necessarily for him. We can trade pieces, but things might not be amazing. Another possibility is we can drop the bishop all the way back, letting him take this pawn and then, and only then, taking back. That's possible. But then this pawn's very vulnerable to this knight. So I don't like that. Another possibility is to give up the bishop and instead take the knight. Then if he takes bishop, is there a good follow-up there? Probably not. So I'm leaning towards either taking. He has to take back with the knight. And then possibly you could take the knight. He takes bishop. And then castles. That's a possibility. It's a definite possibility. So I do have the bishop here. I've got a bit of space on the queen side. But my king's in the center and he's opening up the position. Now the positioning opening should benefit the bishops, which is good. So I think I do want to hold the bishops. I don't think I want to play this move and allow him to do this, taking the pawn. I could take a knight. He can take back, hitting a rook. I could attack the queen. He could take nothing. I think I have to take. And I think that's fine. I think we're all good, but I am starting to want a castle. But we're going to do everything with real purpose. So when he takes back, I don't want to give up the bishop for the knight, letting him recapture, maybe taking here, and then playing this move. Although that seems fine. That seems perfectly fine. It doesn't seem to be winning. It seems relatively equal. So is there anything I can do that's better? Like after he takes, I think the more ambitious plan is to immediately develop the bishop. If I were to castle immediately, then he could have this move. Then he could have that move. However, I now realize he doesn't have that move because I could always take that knight. He would have to take this knight first, then play this move, which isn't scary because it just lets me get my queen to a better spot. Now, if I take the knight, he takes back like this. I'm okay with that. Now, the pawn is hopefully vulnerable. It's difficult to defend with another pawn. So what's he going to do? He attacks my bishop. Well, I was most likely going to have to move that bishop back at a certain point in time anyway. Interestingly, I could take the knight. If he took back, then I would be able to take this pawn. So the idea of taking the knight is he has to take the bishop. But again, I almost don't see a follow-up there. You know, I could come here and attack the queen, but he simply, well, he might think he can simply take the pawn, but he can't because I would have a check forking the queen and the king. So that is interesting. To take the knight, he takes the bishop, to jump up here, hitting the queen. The queen cannot take because of this. That is nice. That's good vision. It's good vision. That's a potential winning, but it relies on him making a mistake. So let's see what would happen if he plays accurately. He takes the bishop. I jump up here, hitting the queen. The queen has other squares it can go to. There's only 3 options. In fact, 2, because if it goes here, that's a big problem. Okay, if he comes here, how do I then respond? And what's the situation? So I've taken a knight. He takes a bishop. I put my knight on a nice square. He comes here. What is the follow-up in that scenario? I suppose one follow-up. It's actually quite hard to find a follow-up there. Is I could defend the knight again. I could defend that knight again and just claim that my knight is a beast. My knight is a beast. He could do away with my knight. So this is now getting complicated. This is definitely now getting complicated if we want to look at this. Let's have a look at the other square for the queen, which is over here. Any other possibilities with this move? Yep. Okay, so this would actually have to be the move because now I see that he takes bishop, I come here. This move fails because of the knight fork. This move here, did we look at that? No, we didn't look at that. So he could come here in that case. But this move would fail because of this, hitting the pawn, hitting the queen. So he would have to come either here or here. So these would be his 2 moves after this. The highlighted squares are where the queen can go. What I don't like is even if I defend my knight, he's then going to be able to, okay, take this pawn, which is why actually after he takes, we come here attacking the queen and it goes to either here or here. We would then take the pawn back. So we would have a pawn here, and a knight here with a queen defending. So we would have a very strong knight. Take, he takes, we come here. He comes probably here to say, let's say he develops the queen. We take this. Then what's his follow-up? Probably immediately goes after the knight. In which case, we still need to castle. He can take the knight, we take back with a pawn, and he can ultimately win that pawn with his queen. So I don't think it works. I don't think it works. Take, he takes, I take. There is a chance he could fall into taking this, but I'm not playing on chances. I'm not playing on chances. In fact, instead, I'm going to play the retreating move. This pawn was always going to be taken. And the whole point of why I played a3 at the start of the game was so that this bishop could be preserved. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. I'm not going to take a chance with speculations. It looked like it was going to get messy and he was going to win a pawn at the least and probably go downhill from there in my perspective if I had instead opted for this line. Even though it could have been tricky. Coming here, there was a fork. If he'd come here, I could win the pawn. But if he comes here or here, I didn't see a good outcome there. Even after taking the pawn, he takes our castle. I didn't see it. If it was there, I didn't see it. And as things stand, I'm still happy. I have the bishop pair. I can castle. My pawn structure is completely fine. And I've still got 32, almost 33 minutes on the clock. And life is pretty good. Life is pretty good. Send a quick message. All right, he takes the pawn, of course. I mean, you somewhat have to do that at this point. Question for me now is castle, take, bishop b2, bishop b3, or something else. Okay. I'm considering bishop b2. I think it looks really nice. It immediately threatens to take, and when he takes back, take, winning a pawn. He couldn't follow up with any threats against my queen because both of those could be taken by the bishop, which would be attacked. So this move looks nice. He only has to move the knight away in order to defend, however. So what if he takes the pawn, I'd take back. Would I not? Where else can he move the knight? Maybe over here. But if he comes there, A, our bishop looks awesome. B, it gives us a chance to say take. And he has to take back like this, at which point we can come here, threatening both a rook, a knight, and if the knight moves, well, we're not threatening mate, but that looks pretty cool. So maybe we actually take the knight, and when he takes back, we put a queen here, double attacking this knight. If the knight moves, the rook falls. So I would imagine he has to defend the knight like so. So take, he comes here. We come here. He either plays this, or another option would be to develop his bishop, I suppose. In that case, he could just develop the bishop. So take, take, queen here, bishop here. It's a possibility. It's a possibility. But this move could be very nice too. This move could be very nice too, taking aim at this pawn. So the goal would be to get pieces on this file. Okay, so where does he move his knight? If he moves his knight there, we can take, or we can take. I think both cases are fine. I think both cases are fine. I thought that, taking, having him take back and then coming here, it just lets him develop. I think we can do better. I want my bishops together on this diagonal, on these two diagonals, where they're somewhat safe. And they exert a lot of influence towards his king in an open position. I think that's the advantage I have from the start. When I played b4, it was to get the bishop pair. Now I need to use that advantage. And the way to use it is to attack the out of his king in an open position. All right, so if he takes, I take back, not a problem. Okay, not a problem. And he's now thinking, I've still got plenty of time, and I really like having a lot of time in a chess game, especially when I'm feeling good. And I am feeling good today. I'm feeling really good today, and so I should. Today is the day that I finished the final assessment in my medical degree. So I am now finished with my medical studies at a university level, and not long now, just have to wait for the graduation ceremony. So it's a good feeling to be done. And in the meantime, I have a chance now to play a game really well against an opponent that outrates me. And like I say, I'm out for blood. I'm not going to give anything away in this game. I'm not going to give anything away in this game. So what can he consider? Obviously, if he takes, I'm going to take back. That somewhat goes without saying. But actually, it doesn't go without saying. Because if he takes the knight, I could take here. And the benefit of taking here is I'm attacking his rook. And I'm also attacking his knight. I don't see how he's going to defend them. So I actually believe this could be a blunder if he takes. Not only that, but this pawn is kind of weak. So like if I were just to take back, sure, he can't really defend this way because that would probably be detrimental to his long-term prospects. So actually, I like my position here a lot. He's going to have to think about something. Again, if he tries to pin my knight, I'm going to kick that bishop away. I'm not afraid of that, but maybe I should consider what happens if he then sacrifices a knight for a check. When I take back, he hits my rook. In that case, I know what I would do. I would castle and just immediately kick that bishop. I'd be up material, but after castling, he would also have the opportunity to play this check. And with a bishop here, I would somewhat be forced into playing this move and giving up my queen. So legitimately, that's actually a threat. Let's calculate. If he comes here, okay, can I play this? Or is this an issue? If he takes that pawn, I guess I could castle immediately and just sacrifice the pawn. And in that instance, my king is safe. His knight is under attack. Whew. All right, so let's just take a breather. We're calculating something in depth that may not actually occur on the board. Other possibilities, he could play just a move like this, overprotecting his knight. But again, I believe in that case, we get to take. And on the recapture, we win a pawn. In such circumstances, he could almost have a check except for the fact that his bishop's here. So in cases like this, it might be better to play this move instead, except then he just gets to take. I suppose in this circumstance, I could take this knight. Then after he takes back, I still don't like that. I actually think this is a nice move for him, and it's something that I have to think about probably more than the other moves on that are possible. I don't think I have to be worried about a pawn storm that weakens his king probably more than mine, and by the way, gives up the pawn again. So I really think this is a good move for him to consider. And it's not easy for me to deal with necessarily. It's actually not. So what would I do here? If bishop's here and I play this, what if he takes with the bishop? If he takes with the bishop, I take back. He takes with the knight. That's check. I come here. He brings his queen in with check. So I wonder if I might actually have to come this way if he brings his bishop here. If he brings his bishop here, I do this. Regardless of how he sacrifices, I think I like the idea of bringing my king over here and trying to use all this open space in conjunction with my bishops to attack him. And to get my king over here where it's at least still protected by pieces, better than being protected by nothing, because if these pawns disappear, there's not much over here that can protect the king. So bishop g4, f3, and then let's say knight takes f3, pawn takes f3. Okay, he hasn't done it. He hasn't done it, but he's targeting this pawn in the long run. I don't know if I mind about that because that could open up this file. So I might let him take this pawn. Besides, I'm going to, if I take this knight right now, opening up my queen. Right, this is interesting. So take, take, take. I've won a pawn already. Where does he go with his knight? I don't see really anywhere. I guess he can come here, looking at this square twice. And also attacking my bishop. All right, so take, take, take. If he were to come here, I've got this. But then he takes the bishop and defending the knight simultaneously. It's not a real defense of the knight. Maybe I should castle. Maybe I should castle. At least now he can't put his bishop over here, so I'm not as worried about that. So maybe now castles is a good idea. I mean, takes is possible, but maybe now is the time to castle. If I castle and he brings his queen over here, I can always play this if I want, because then takes. What do we do? We could play a move like this. We could take, just take once and let that pawn sit. Then play something like this to pressure that pawn and to protect this pawn and to possibly allow long castles. How about that? So takes, queen comes here. All right. He could attack the queen. But if he attacks the queen, well, the queen can drop. Or the queen could even jump up to here if I wanted to. Those are options. They're options. We could take, but then he can recapture with the queen, which I don't like. We could play this move then, hitting the queen. But because he can take, we can't actually then recapture. Whereas if we were to play this move now, whether he takes with the pawn or the knight, well, if he takes with the knight, yeah, so no, we can't do that. Still out for blood, absolutely. We just need to figure out how to extract the blood from the position. And it might be a matter of patience. I think castles probably puts an end to some of those threats of his. So I think that's what I'm going to do. You know, if he brings the queen down, I think then we can take. That actually brings me to another idea. Takes, he takes back, and then queen here. Okay, pressurizing this knight. If the knight moves away anywhere, we can take the bishop. So that's very interesting. So it takes, he takes, so we come here, he can check. That's also really annoying. So I'm going to castle. I think the time has come to castle. I can do this on the next move and I'll feel better about it. Now, these files are not open. That's true. He doesn't have a dark squared bishop, so f4 is playable at some point, potentially. But I just like the fact that, now after a move like this, I'm getting the queen here. If I were to go that way, there's no check that he can give that annoys the living hell out of me. All right. The ball's back in his court, and I'm quite sure I haven't blundered. I don't think I missed any opportunity to take a great advantage. Of course, we're going to see after the game the extent to which I may or may not have done so. But at present, I'm castled, he's castled, we're both castled on the same side of the board. He's got a very active knight, but that knight I can very easily take if I want. And in fact, presently I'm threatening to take it. And if he recaptures with the pawn, I'm threatening to take that pawn as well. So at present, he has a threat to deal with. My development is therefore slightly better than his. I'd say my pawn structure is slightly better than his. And I have the pair of bishops. So objectively speaking, my position is really good. Whether subjectively I can find the answers that exist within the position, you know what? That's up to me. That's up to me. And we're on a journey. I'm on a journey. A long-term journey. I'm expecting it to take a minimum of 6 to 10 years and potentially longer. But I'm on a journey to become an international master of chess. I'd like to say grandmaster of chess, of course. And who knows, maybe in my retirement, I will aim for that. First and foremost, I'm going for the international master title. And I have some pretty cool, news that may be upcoming soon on the channel. So I've mentioned it a couple of times, and I'm going to mention it again. Look out, keep a lookout, and hit subscribe. Because I think this channel is a little bit different than other channels. This channel, obviously, I'm not a grandmaster. I'm not an international master. And most of the people who are streaming on chess are either already a grandmaster or an international master. The difference is, in these games, I don't see things immediately the way that they do. I have to think about things, and it's more like, for most people, it's more like what they have to do in a real game. So watching my games, from the perspective of most people, they get to really take a seat in my thought process. Sometimes when you're watching, Hikaru Nakamura, and he just pre-moves things that would take me a while to see and that I wouldn't see, even if I had a while. He's that good that it's almost like you're sitting in his car and he goes so fast that you actually fall out. Whereas the difference is, in this sort of a channel, you can sit in the car and we're just going to go for a cruise. We're going to go for a cruise. And if you're 1400 rated, 1200 rated, approximately the same rating level as me, I think you really can get a lot from this channel that you might not get from other channels. Now, clearly, this is a move that I'd considered. He's pressurizing the G2 point, which could become quite vulnerable to attacks that involve a threat of checkmate. However, he's also allowing me to win a pawn if I so desire. The question is, after I win that pawn, does he have a way to threaten checkmate in a way that can't be stopped? And it looks as though he sort of does, but at the same time, doesn't G3 just stop all threats? To me, G3 stops all threats. It would also be possible here just to attack the queen, rerouting that bishop to attack the queen. And that's a possibility. f4, is f4 a possibility? You know, perhaps after I take here, he plays this, f4 leads to mate. So again, we've got to be careful about the g2 square. I'm going to highlight it just so that whatever move I think about, I always remember to look at g2. So again, if we take this knight, if he immediately jumps over here looking for mate, I would say that this should do the trick, because I just don't see how he actually executes the mate there. Another move that could be, you know, played with is just knight to g3, forever blocking the queen's access to g2, and possibly preparing knight e4. That's a nice idea, potentially. Okay. So what would be his response? Would there be sense in playing a move like this? Well, yes, because then even though I hit the queen, he still threatens mate. And when he has the knight here, it's a bit hard for me to get rid of it, because with my knight here, I can never play g3. But takes. Let's look at that first, because it wins a pawn. First and foremost, it wins a pawn. And he still has to move the knight away in order to create the mate threat. He could move the knight somewhere like this where it attacks my queen. I think that's what he would do. Because of course, if I take either with the pawn or with the whatchamacallit, then the checkmate becomes available, which obviously we don't want to allow. There could be the possibility of giving up the bishop, but as we've said, that would lead to mate. So maybe we play f4 straight away. If he takes, then I can even just put a rook here and sacrifice, or if he takes with the knight, then I can take back. But not really, because if he takes with the knight, there's no time to take back because of the mate threat. So knight g3 does come to mind. g3 is also possible. g3 is definitely possible. f3 is possible as well. But f3, can he take here? No, he can't. I don't believe he can take, but he could. He could, because he would end up having discoveries against my rook. And if I were to either take with my rook or the pawn, then he would have, again, the mate. So maybe knight g3 is the way to go. Perhaps knight g3 is the way to go. As much as I liked the idea of taking and then maybe putting a queen here, I don't think we have time to do it, because take, he immediately plays the knight across. So that means that the essential move for me to consider after takes and knight f4, or for that matter, knight e3 might even be better, because then it's hitting my queen. Hitting my queen and threatening mate. So I don't think I can allow that. So therefore, g3 does come to mind. It completely opens up this diagonal, though, which I'm not too happy about. You know, and it means that he might be able to play moves like this and start getting in there. And I don't want to allow that. So therefore, we come up with the move knight g3. Knight g3, again, he could play this move. I can pin that knight to an extent. What are some other possibilities? What if I attack the queen immediately and just give him a pawn? Is there a benefit to doing that? Not that I can tell. What about... Yeah, I'm just a bit worried about him jumping this knight away to here with an attack on the queen, which is also an attack against this square here. So that's pretty dangerous. Also, you know, the queen does a good job of protecting this square. I'm wondering, you know, do I have to play something like this, and does that even help? And I don't think that it does. It doesn't. It doesn't help. So this is actually very, very nice move that he's played. And I didn't actually, I knew it was dangerous to be castling over here, but I assumed I would have the resources. And honestly, I must have the resources. It's a matter of finding them. G3 could be it, but it is weakening and I don't want to commit to it. F3 could also do the job, but it allows this move. But it allows that move. So G3 is currently looking like a top choice. Knight G3 is looking like a choice, but I'd have to have a response ready for this move. And I don't like the fact that this is loose. I might have to give up a bishop in the end, or otherwise maybe C3 at a certain point, but I don't think I can afford to take this knight in either way because of this move, hitting my queen. So maybe this move would be possible, hitting his queen, but it gives up the knight. So then, very, very, very interesting. So I'm looking at G3, I'm looking at knight G3. Knight G3 looks okay. If he doesn't play this move immediately, then I can be okay. I think that his best move here is knight F4. So let's make sure that that's actually okay before we proceed, because he is threatening then to come in with a check. So should we then take this knight? Probably. But keeping in mind that if this knight ever moves, this threat still lurks. And that would be a benefit of playing G3 instead. Benefit of playing G3 instead is that nothing's pinned. Then let's say he plays this move, and then I can take the knight. And we either get a queen trade, or yeah, we'd probably get a queen trade. So I think G3 is actually quite possibly the move, but it feels so weakening to play. It also allows H4, and then I can put my king over here and, you know, hopefully that's okay. So what does he play against G3? He still could play this move, but it's lost some of its luster there. Another move he can play here is this, check. Oh boy. After the check, I have to move on to the diagonal, which gives him the opportunity to scare me. To scare me, but not necessarily to do much more than scare. He could come here hitting my rook. Yeah, this is really dangerous for me, actually. He could come here hitting my rook, and he's also threatening discovery. So I feel castling short was a mistake. I think castling short was a mistake. And perhaps this idea wouldn't have been too bad. And if he'd given me the check, then I could go king e2. That probably would have been better. Nevertheless, we're here now. We are here now. We need to come up with something. At present, I'm thinking this is the best move I can find, but I'm not particularly pleased with it. I think it has to be played. Not particularly pleased with it. Okay, but it is what it is. We've still got time. I think I'm worse here. I'm probably not losing. I'm sure there's defensive resources. There must be, but my bishops are a long way from my king, and his single bishop is doing a good job. His pieces are very active, and actually his development is better than mine now with such well-developed pieces. His rooks are connected. You know, his position does look good. And he's got a lot of pressure on g2, which is not easy for me to defend. I'm going to need to come up with a way to do it, possibly by rerouting the bishop. It's a possibility. And, I might have to give up some bishops for the greater good, but we're going to see. We're going to see. Okay, I'm not sure really what the best move is for him here. I was thinking he probably wants to do this just to open up this diagonal for his bishop and simply to pressurize that square, which it does both of those things very, very well. And how do I deal with that? I guess at that point I can play f3. At that point, I could play f3 because there's no longer a fork available on e3. Still, my knight remains very vulnerable. So if he were to then play a move like this, I can't take because it's defended by his other knight. And I can't take it this way because then mate would follow. So it means he's going to be able to plant a knight right up in my face here, which I don't like, obviously. So maybe if he plays a move like this, perhaps I take the knight first. Because what does he do? Like if he just takes this with his knight, well, I just took a knight of yours, so I can then do things. And if he takes with his bishop, hitting my rook, again, I hit the queen. And then I save the knight, save the rook after that. So that might be the move, is get rid of one of these knights for my bishop. Not that I want to get rid of my bishops, but that I might have to. I might have to. As much as I came out and I'm here for blood, and I still am, if I have to settle for a draw and fight tooth and nail to hang on to a draw, I can try and do that. We both have plenty of time on the clock. This game's got a long way to go, as long as I don't make any great big blunder, and as long as I haven't already done so. I wouldn't mind going for a queen trade. The problem is he can take this pawn with an attack on the rook. And I wouldn't mind, attacking this knight to get it out, but I don't think he needs prompting here. And, I could put a rook over here. Potentially, I could throw that pawn up the board and attack the knights. But again, does he need the prompting? Maybe a move like this. If he takes with the bishop, then there's this. But he takes. It would, at least it would give up a pawn. It would relieve a lot of pressure on my position, though. And it would allow me to get my knight to e4, at least temporarily, gaining some counterplay. I'm going to need counterplay, obviously, if I'm going to win. So what I'm hoping for is that either his attack goes wrong and he overextends himself, that I can actually defend everything and then get him on a counter attack. But at the moment, he's attacking. He's in my half. If this is a soccer game, he's in my half of the field. He's in and around my box right now, and I just need to block all of his shots and any of his pieces that are making runs. I need to make sure that they're not opening me up to, either a shot coming through or another piece making a different run somewhere else. So I've got to be very aware. If I can weather the storm, then we should be all right to regroup and play on. All right, again, so I would imagine a move like this is going to be a good move for him. Bringing rooks to the center of the board also makes some sense. Would it make sense to develop a pawn in this manner? Possibly, yeah, maybe. But personally, I think this move makes a lot of sense. I really think that move makes a lot of sense. Just pressurizing this pawn. Like I said, in that regard, I was going to take this knight to start with. And then if he takes this, I would be able to attack the queen and save the rook, hopefully. So that would be the plan. And if he takes with the pawn, so, if he plays this, I take, if he takes with the pawn, then then I think I could play f3 quite safely. I think then f3 would be quite safe, looking to play knight e4 shortly thereafter. Could he play a move like this? That could be very dangerous, because as mentioned, this knight can't do a lot of moving at the moment. It really can't do a lot of moving at the moment. So actually, f5 could be a really nice move for him. He doesn't go for it, though. Now, here I was probably going to just play this move. Attack the queen, blockade his pawn. And where does his queen go? That's not really scary anymore. If he attacks my queen, I can take his queen. Excuse me. So I kind of think this could be a move here. f5 now, and I take the queen. I think he should have played f5. f5 looks kind of scary. Another possibility here would not be this, but maybe we could take the knight right now. Take the knight now. And then if he takes back, well, then we can put a queen here. Although this knight will already be defended amply. It's true. Knight e4 seems to make a great deal of sense, though. Knight e4 seems to make a great deal of sense. You hit the queen. I guess the queen can come somewhere like this, but then it relieves the pressure off f2, which is g2, sorry, which is really good. If he wants to maintain pressure on g2, he has to bring the queen here. But that in itself somewhat relieves a lot of pressure. I could even then take this, he takes back, and play something like f5, which I'm sort of wondering if I can play, sorry, f4 anyway. Certainly the queen cannot recapture. The knight could recapture. Were the pawn to recapture, I could take here. Then he takes here. So I don't know about that. If we take this first and then play this, if he takes, I'm not too sure about it. We could attack the queen this way as well. Then he can play this. I don't really think we want to let him play that. So I think we do want to play this move. It frees up the position a little bit. Where's he going to go with the queen? And what do we do after that? Well, another thing we could do is always come here, potentially. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I have a chance to. And I think it's a really important move to get in. I think it's an important move to get in. It somewhat defeats the purpose of his previous move. And it somewhat forces him to rearrange the pieces that were so pressurizing my position. Okay, I still have the option of trading these pieces off if need be. So I'm going to play this move first. We're going to see where he puts the queen. I like that I have this option. That's a beautiful outpost square for the knight. I could take this and then hit his queen. Okay, so he goes back there. So what I'm thinking is if I attack the bishop, well, nothing's defending this bishop at present. What he could do is go for a mate threat there so that I wouldn't be able to take the bishop because of mate. So here he could play this. Again, we're back in this scenario. So I want to be careful of that now. So first of all, how can I be most careful? I'm not sure. Possibly we want to take this knight and just get it out of the game. Okay, possibly. That's possibly what we want to do. However, possibly not. You know, we may want to definitely not play this. Maybe if the knight was out of the game, maybe then we could play a move like this. Do we want to play f4 or f3? f3 could be good just to get a rook on the f file. We want to kick this knight this way. Where would it go? Where would this knight go now? Can't come here, literally. Could come here, but then it blocks its bishop, which is good for me. Could come here, blocks the rook, which is good for me. Could come here, but then I simply take. Could come here. But I don't think I need to be too afraid of this move. It does allow me then to play this if I wanted to. Yeah, really tough position. Tough position. Possibly moves like this come to mind. That bishop is basically killer. What if I take, he takes back? Then again, there's no moving here because of the mate threat. So if I take and he takes back, then I can take and he takes back. And then I could just play f3. And I reckon there I'm doing okay. I reckon there I'm doing okay. Even if he plays a move like this, I think that might be my best option, giving up the bishops, because his knights are really good. There's no doubt about it. The knights are good. I'd love to have my bishops, but he's got a really bloody good bishop as well. So takes, he takes. Takes, I guess that he could take here. Then after I take, he can take here. And then I can take. And the position looks, again, pretty equal. So at least I'm not losing. At least it doesn't look like I'm losing. And you know, that might be the way to go. Maybe taking this knight first. So he's almost certainly going to take back, then taking here. So he's almost certainly going to take that. And then f3. Potentially. I mean, in the absence of anything better, I'm not too sure I do see much better. You know, my knight will end up being good. His bishop will be a bishop. That's true. Bishop versus knight endgame. Something I need to make a video about for the purposes of my own learning, because that would end up being a bishop versus a knight. But it's a good bishop. It's a good knight, and the bishop won't be able to touch it. And my pawns can be defended, I think. I think I probably do start by taking this. Yes, I can do this, but that creates weaknesses. And all he has to do is retreat, or even bring the piece over here where it's once again dangerous to me. I'm going to give up my bishops, or at least one of them. Then we'll reconsider. I know that this opens up his rook, but his other rook still doesn't look great. And of course, I won't have the bishop here anymore to attack that rook. Such is life. Now, again, if I attack this bishop, he's got this move. He's got this move. I could then play No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go with my plan. I believe f3 is what I'm going to do. Although I could do it with a rook as well. If I do it with a rook, let's say he takes, I take, he takes, no. So I'm going to do it f3. And I feel the position is stabilized, at least here. I've blunted his bishop. And thereby really released a lot of the pressure from the position. I've secured a good knight. He's got a bishop, so that's why I was saying knight versus bishop. If I can get my knight up here, which I now can do since he can't take the pawn. And from here, it's an unassailable knight, which is wonderful. But there's actually not really any good outpost squares for his bishop. And so I wonder if I've converted the advantage of a bishop pair into the advantage of a good knight versus a bad bishop. And so therefore, I wonder if he's going to take that. And if he does, I would take back this way, opening up my rook, closing down his rook. At which point, again, it's been a battle this game. It's been a real battle. I don't think I've played poorly. Possibly I could have calculated, the ramifications earlier on of that combination where my queen landed on f3, and then I saw that he could give me a check from the rook on e8, and then my king would have to run this way. But that was complicated, really complicated, at least to me. I'll be interested what a grandmaster would think about that and how they would have thought about that position. But certainly I did see that castling short would give him some attacking possibilities, but I judged that I would have the resources to defend. And I believe I did, although I don't believe he actually attacked in the best possible way. Namely, I think when he played rook e8, I think that's where he just lost a lot of firepower. And actually that f5 would have been a lot harder for me to deal with at the time. Now f5 is not a problem for me because I have a nice place to just go and put my knight over there. And it's almost at the stage where if he offered me a draw here, I'd probably accept. I'd probably accept a draw against a higher rated player and say, I did all right. Because materially we're equal. And in terms of the position, it's now fairly slow looking. I don't expect him to offer me a draw. Being the higher rated opponent, you would think that in a fairly equal position, he's going to push for a win. But we'll see. We shall see. Is there any benefit in taking with the other pawn? There is. And the other benefit is that this pawn immediately comes under attack. But it's easy for him to defend that pawn. And in fact, it gives him the motivation and the incentive to do so with this rook, thereby freeing this rook to come back over here. So I think I would rather leave this all closed, leave that position closed, and then just play from there, try and get a rook here to attack this pawn. If he defends it, so be it. But maybe then I can double or get an Alekhines gun happening with a rook, a queen, and a rook. Again, it's going to be hard to make progress, but if we end up in an end game where it's just heavy pieces on the board, then king safety really matters. Both of us have currently got safe kings. But I would accept a draw at this point. I would accept a draw if he offers it. I'm in focus mode, so I don't know if he is offering a draw or not. We should just click out and double check. I'd even get 2 rating points for a draw. He's rated 17-14. So like I say, he does outrate me. 17-14 is about as high as I've ever been in terms of chess ratings. I think I've been slightly higher once before. Maybe 17-21 is my all-time high. And we're certainly trying to work back there. And not losing is a good first step in getting back. taking a draw where you can't win is fine, but losing is to be avoided. So I don't blame him at all for taking his time here. What else could he do? It's kind of hard to come up with plans. I guess he could try and improve the rook. That would be a plan. He could just try and improve the rook. And in that case, what would I do? He can put the ball in my court. Absolutely, he can put the ball in my court. I suppose in that case, I've got development to complete myself. I can bring my queen here and maybe try and get it here one day to attack this pawn. And just claim that it's a little bit difficult for him to defend this pawn, actually, which is somewhat true. It sort of is difficult for him to defend this pawn. Unless he does this, or if I do this, and then he were to double up. Okay, so he comes here. Maybe trying to goat me into playing f5, thereby opening this diagonal again, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm going to do that at all. Now, another benefit of playing here is I can bring the knight here to attack this pawn. And then it truly is difficult for him to defend. He could bring a rook here. Then I can come here and he can move the bishop away, and that will defend the pawn. So he can still defend the pawn. Certainly. I think what I'm going to do, possibly I could expand on the queen side, attacking this pawn. And he's got 3 ways to defend the pawn. 1, 2, or 3. Of those, if he defends with the pawn, I can take. And if he takes back, I've opened a file that I can immediately sit a rook on to attack that pawn again, which is nice. Nothing wrong with that, I don't think. It leaves this pawn undefended, I suppose, but he doesn't have a bishop that can attack the pawn. Another thing he could do is he could take. If he takes, though, I could, simply take back, attacking this pawn. And that could be nice. What's his idea? That's also very important to pay attention to, because what he probably also is thinking of is taking and then putting a rook over here. But that's actually very easy to deal with. Now that I can always put a rook on f2 if I want, then I'm not so worried about it. I wonder if I should actually get my knight over here so that it is preserved as a strong knight. Because even if he comes here, like I say, I can defend. I can defend at least for the time being. Maybe only for the time being, though. Maybe only for the time being. This move he can take on passant. And if I were to recapture, I just don't really like that. But yeah, a3 is a move that I'm thinking of, definitely. a3 I'm definitely thinking of. He defends with his bishop, not a problem, I guess. I could either take, or I could just proceed, pushing further forward. So a3 definitely comes to mind. If he takes, well, cool. I've opened that position. Rook to e1. Is that what I can't really understand what he's... If he takes there, I don't mind. And if he comes here, I don't mind. So I'm going to play a4. Thinking that the position is a draw, that I'll be able to defend anything that he throws at me, and that opening up this file for my rook, if that's what happens, isn't going to hurt me. And waiting to see what he does. And I would anticipate, well, now he's got to deal with this in some way or other. So he can't I don't think he can't just simply double his rooks. He still wouldn't be threatening to do anything there. So I imagine he's going to defend the pawn somehow. Probably like this is what I would expect of him. Then if I take, he's going to have to take this way, and that would lose a pawn. So actually, I do like a4. I think it's a good move. I expect him to defend this way. Then I can take, and I get a rook up to the 7th rank with a tempo on a pawn. So that's got benefit to it. So he's going to do exactly that. So allowing takes. And I don't mind this idea of getting a strong knight up here to blockade his pawn. Okay, yes, this is a possibility as well. But at this point, I'm about to get an open file. So what's the issue here? Could also play a move like this to forever forbid the rook move. But that really weakens the g3 square in future if I do move the knight away. So I'd rather keep my king very, very safe and secure. Rather keep my king safe and secure. Thinking about just taking, really. Let's take that. Then I'll consider this move. Or this move. Or this move. Okay. I suppose if this move, he's going to play this. Keep everything defended. Likewise, I suppose if I play this move, if he doesn't immediately take, then he will most likely play this. What I like is after moving the rook, I can get my queen to a1, where it will pressurize the pawn. Also, having my knight here means that I can put my knight there to put pressure on the pawn as well. I think my rook and my king are sufficient to defend themselves there. So I think we can move up with a tempo on this piece, or on this pawn. Then when he defends the pawn, most likely like so, move the queen over to a1 with a tempo on this pawn. Also, by the way, defending this rook. If he takes, we can take back without any trouble. And if he then comes over here, we still have no trouble. So I think we should do that. Coming here is fine as well. Tempo on this guy. But rooks belong on the 7th. So let's go to the 7th. Now, maybe I should have put the knight here first, but I'm not wedded to that idea because it lets his rook get over to here. I would rather him have to take and just close the position because at this point, honestly speaking, as much as I am out for blood, at this point, I believe the game is a draw. And I'm happy to wait until he takes. And then I'm confident that I can keep everything defended. So in the meantime, let's put a bit of pressure on his weaknesses. You know, depending on how he defends this pawn, if he were to retract a rook, then after I put pressure on this pawn, we might have an opportunity to attack his queen. Or to go for a rook trade of some kind. And the position starts to trade down. Okay, as expected there. That's very much as expected. Now, this move definitely does come to mind now, even though we can play this. The reason I don't love it is that if I play this move, I always have to have the queen here to defend the pawn. Because if he takes this and I take with the rook, well, then he gets this check-in, which I just don't want to allow. So I'm going to play relatively quickly this move, defending the rook. And I'm happy that everything else in my position is safe. I've given him a challenge to deal with. I can go for rook trades if I want. I can keep everything defended. So in fact, I love that the rook's on the 7th. I didn't think about this, but if he ever does take my knight, we're already going to have some built-in pressure there that he will have to deal with. Currently, he has to deal with a pawn, and honestly, I don't know if he can. After takes, okay, there is this move. I'm sure he can. Like, I do think it's a draw, but it might actually become slightly difficult. If it's a draw, I feel comfortable. I feel like it's a comfortable draw for me. So as long as I don't lose track of something important, we should be fine. He's got plenty of time, and I absolutely don't blame him for using it whatsoever. I think I've played a nice game. I mean, I'll be really interested to see, like with the computer, what it says. And just to analyze things further on my own, particularly with regards to the decision to castle short. That's the only decision in the game so far that I probably haven't been thrilled about. I'm not upset about it, but I wonder if there was something better. If there was, I imagine it was much more complicated. I'm thinking maybe I could have castled earlier in the game. I did take an aggressive approach. I was out for blood from the start. And that's why I didn't castle straight away and play, you know, super solid. I went for him. I went for the throat. He defended and threw a few hooks back at me. But I closed up and defended everything. And I think after the dust has settled, my position's good. I think it's at least a draw for me here. And it's kind of easy to play for me as well. He's got a backward pawn here. I'm immediately attacking this pawn. I have a backward pawn too, no doubt. His queen is not awkwardly placed. It's fine. Everything's fine. I think it's equal, but it's comfortable for me to play. 21 minutes on his clock, so I don't blame you if you click out of the video at this point. If you're still with me, you probably deserve some kind of a prize. So I'll tell you what, if you are watching this video, this is no joke. If you're watching this video, this is only for the first person to comment at this stage. If you comment and you are the first person to comment, leave a comment below saying, yep, I'm still watching it. I will DM you and I'll ask you for your address and I will send you a chessboard. We'll choose one on Amazon. No joke. I will send it to you. I'll just pay for it on Amazon, enter in your name and address, and I'll send you a chessboard. So if you're watching and there's no comments, then don't waste your time. Get straight on it. All right, so he's taken my bishop. Now I have a half a mind here to take the pawn. I think we should consider that, because if we take the pawn, we're threatening his rook. We're threatening the rook. And I think there's benefit to threatening the rook here. The benefit to threatening the rook is he has to defend it. Now, he could counterattack the queen, but then we take the bishop. And we've won a pawn. He could take this pawn, actually, and then if we take the rook, he would have mate. So that would be not that good. He could take this, we could take like this, and then he could save his rook. But in that circumstance, we've given up a bishop and a pawn for a bishop and a pawn. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. I mean, the alternative is really that we take the bishop like this, and we ask him how he wants to defend the pawn. And most likely it would be with either a rook or a queen. But I do like the idea of opening up this file. Absolutely, I like that idea. I think we can use that to our advantage as the game progresses. But I'll look at this again carefully. We take a pawn. I think the critical move is not whether or not he attacks the queen, because we take the rook. So that's not the issue. I think the issue is what happens if he takes this pawn. If he takes that pawn, we take bishop. So then it's so far an even trade because he's taken a piece, we take a pawn, he takes a pawn, we take a piece. So we've both got a pawn and a piece. And at the end of that, his rook is still under attack, but he can defend it. He can defend it pretty easy. My queen sort of gets in its own way there as well, which is fine. It probably honestly doesn't make much of a difference. I'm going to open this rook. I'm going to open the rook, avoid the complications. I don't think they lead to any kind of a win. I don't think it actually wins a pawn. So if I'm not going to win a pawn, I would rather actually open up this file for the rook and just say, look, you still have to deal with this problem. Now, he can deal with it by creating the mate threat, and that's totally fine. Then I just have to decide whether I want to, actually, it's not even a mate threat. It's a check threat. And then I just step to the side. So it would lose a pawn, but it's certainly possible that in response to this, I can just take this pawn right here, which gives me good prospects in the end game. You know, because then even if he takes this, no worries, mate, I step to the side. Any check there, I can just take. Okay, so he decides to defend with his queen, giving up a lot of the pressure here, which feels like a relief. Now the question is, do I have any tactics here to win? For example, can I take this? If he wants to take back, he has to use the rook. If he uses the rook, I've got check. Okay. And if he defends with the rook, we don't have the ability to check because his queen also still does defend there. So that, again, another combination would be to take. If he takes with the rook, can we play this move? Pinning the rook. But then he's got plenty of time to defend. So I don't think we have a tactic there. I think what might be better would be to just defend this pawn in a sensible way, perhaps like so. That seems fairly sensible. Does align ourselves with his rook, which may not be ideal. Another option is this, but then we give up the open file that or the semi-open file that we wanted to open up earlier. This is another option, just to continue holding pressure on his pawn at the same time as we defend ours. And another option is just to offer him a draw as well. Now, of those options, is there anything else that could be better here? Ultimately, it might be nice to get a rook, here and a queen here, and to go for something like this, but it's basically dreaming at this stage to think that's going to happen. Could use the pawn to defend. If he takes back, we take back. Position opens, I'd rather keep it closed. We cannot defend it with this guy, but what we could do is a counterattack. So you're going to take the pawn, fine, but we're going to take this pawn. So that's possible, for sure. What about just this move immediately? You're going to take this pawn, fine. We're going to take this pawn. I think that works. I think that works, actually. It also brings out possibilities in future of tripling on the file. Not that that necessarily achieves a whole lot. But it is a way to defend the pawn, isn't it? Because he takes, giving himself some prospects. So maybe we're better off defending this with the plan of playing this in future. That could be better. Let's do that. A bit scary that my queen is currently undefended. But I don't see really much happening here for either side. Potentially, though, if he moves his rook away, I don't see why I don't just take. If he does something like this, well, I guess I can take that. That's probably what he should do. I would imagine. Take, and then however he takes back. Oh, okay. So he's giving me the option to give this check at any point in time that I may desire, which is interesting. I'm wondering if I should get up here now. Now what happens if I give the check? He can block and, we can get a queen trade. And that would be okay. That would be just fine. Or he can move his king. It's another possibility. Okay. I need a plan here because the game's not over. Game isn't over. Considering a move like this, not too sure what it achieves. There is the check, and like if he comes here, going for a rook trade, he can come down here, but just not really, actually. So I think check rook trade would in fact be a rook trade or a queen trade. Which would be totally fine, I think. Of course, I would love to win this pawn. Is there a way to do that? I'm not sure. How about a waiting move with the rook? If we come here, is he actually getting a weaker position there? I'm not too sure. How about bringing my rook here, just to pin this pawn? I can't attack it really any further, though. Perhaps doubling my rooks? Perhaps that makes sense. Is he going to want to play this move? I just don't know. I think my rook is good where it is. I can just make a waiting move. I'm going to go for the check and either trade the queens or otherwise I'm not sure what comes next, to be honest. Perhaps coming back here. I don't really like how weak this pawn is, though. So perhaps I'll just leave my queen here and maneuver my rooks around until we agree to a draw. I think that should be fine. I just don't want to do anything that like irreparably alters the position in a negative manner for me. Like he might do that. He might ruin his position somehow. I think if I'm offered queen trades, I'll take them. Specifically because I don't see anything else worth doing. And also because it moves his rook back and allows my rook to occupy that square, which if he wants to come back again, gives us another trade. Sort of fixing up his pawns a little bit actually there. I mean, again, a draw would be welcome. I guess if he moves his king away, my rook could look pretty nice over here. maybe. But there is issues then with losing this pawn. So possibly this rook should come over here, or possibly I should be actually considering moves like this at a point in time when my queen is here. Because as much as I'm saying it's a draw, I got to be super careful that I don't allow it to transform to a losing endgame through my own complacency. So what does he do? I mean, he can move here. That's true. He could certainly move there. I can come here saying, you take this, I take this. Or even better, you take this, I come here threatening mate. And after you defend, after you defend the mate, I could take that. So he's just moved to the side. So now I've got a guaranteed rook trade if I want it. Guaranteed rook trade if I want it. But if I play that, he's probably going to take the pawn. But if he takes the pawn, I take a rook with check, which is great for me. So if I do this, he cannot take the pawn. Instead, he could bring his rook back. And, that's one pair of rooks traded. If I want to do that and bring my, I'd love to get a rook here and then put that rook there. That would be a nice plan. To do that, I need to get this guy to move. So I would welcome this. Then take, he comes here, get my rook here. If he gets his rook here, okay, well, we take. And regardless of how he recaptures, is that position then bad for me because he's looking at this pawn all day long? Not too sure. I've got a minute 43 only, so I do actually now have to be a bit careful of time. Maybe I'll just bring the queen back here. Moves like this could occur. I'm going to go for a queen trade, a rook trade. Because even if he takes this pawn, eventually, my queen will look at this. So I'm going to just trust that the position's a draw and trade some things down, but obviously going to keep doing it with my eyes open. If he takes the rook, I'm going to immediately recapture with the queen so that I don't get into any time pressure. And this is the beauty of having a 45-second increment. But yeah, this endgame is going to be a learning point for me, definitely, because he's pushing here to make something happen, whereas I'm pushing for a draw. So I've got to change my attitude and play as if I'm playing for a what? I made a mistake. His rook actually is still defended by the queen. So that was my mistake. What can I do about that now? That's potentially a big blunder that I've done. All right, so if I attack his queen, he can take my rook with an attack on my queen. Not really, though. What he could do is he could take my rook. He'd be up 6 points. I take that, I'm up 3. He takes that, he's up 2 points in material. I think I just mucked it up. Well, let's take the rook anyway. I think we have to do that now. And now we need to come up with a better plan. At least our weak pawn is gone, if you want to look at it from that perspective. We could come here and look at this pawn. Which is probably what we ought to do. We could also bring a rook across, but I'm not sure where we want to put it yet. So I'll just put the queen here for the time being. Pressurizing the pawn. Oh, that's disappointing. Oh, that's disappointing. I went for the queen trade. I should have just kept everything stable and said, there's nothing happening here for you, sir. and accepted any of these kinds of transformations happily. That's what I should have done, but I too eagerly went for the draw, thinking that he was unable to take this because of the rook hanging, forgetting that he can just recapture. So it's a real shame. The game's not over. Game is definitely not over. Still could be a draw. He has an extra pawn, however. He has an extra pawn, so technically he should be winning. He should be winning here, but it is still far from over. It's a heavy piece endgame, and I would say my king's a bit safe than his, but his pawns are more advanced. They're more likely to become queens quicker than mine are. So it just depends on what happens, I guess. Not too sure of how to evaluate it. I think I want to keep pieces on the board. I want to transfer my rook over to the A file, which is open, possibly to the B file. And I want to get my king active. I may want to play H5, but probably not. You can just keep those two G and H pawns where they are. Excuse me. Excuse me. All right. So clearly there's a check, which forces him here. And then I could go for this rook trade, but see, he's also looking at this pawn now. This ain't good. This really ain't good. So I'm gonna just try and keep everything defended. You know, and I suppose that would be the goal. Bring my rook over here. It's very passive. I could also bring my rook here. It's kind of equally passive. There's really no counter attack though. After check, if I were to come here and give up the pawn, what's the point? I mean, I can take the rook, he takes back. I can give another check and then take this pawn, but then he's going to take this pawn. So I don't think I can allow that. I'm running it low on time. So I'm going to do what I probably should have done earlier. And I'm going to try and keep everything solid. And at least make it difficult for him to make progress. Maybe build up a bit more time. But now I'm down a pawn. It's a heavy piece endgame. So king safety matters, and I guess he's got a few more weaknesses around his king than I do. And the extra pawn he has is kind of currently not doing a lot. So it's not going to be easy for him to win, as long as I play in a solid fashion. But I'm pretty disappointed that I lost that pawn there by going for the rook trade. I should have done better with that. But we're here now. We've got to make the most of it. Definitely got to try and make the most of it. He never has to move his rook. I should have just recognized that the position was stable and kept it stable rather than actively searching for a draw. Just let the stability of the position create a draw of its own accord. That would have been better. So I guess we'll see what comes next. So with this move, he's just improved his queen, I suppose. Now, I want to play this move, I think. Is there a reason why I shouldn't try and improve my rook and kick his queen out from where it currently sits? I mean, I could go for a queen trade. If he takes, most likely he's going to try and get a passed pawn, which would be hard for me to deal with. So I think this is all right. The thing is, after I play this, he's going to have checkmate right there. And so I wonder, therefore, should I actually just play this? I mean, if I come here, I could always put my king here before playing this move. That's a slightly more active way to do it, but my pieces feel a bit discoordinated there. So what I'll do is I will defend like this. And I may try and get my king active, but I could totally imagine him now playing a move like this. Although that doesn't really scare me. I can fight him off that way. So he can't advance this pawn at the moment because he would lose the pawn on b5. He's got 17 minutes to figure it out, plus an extra 45 seconds per move. And I would say this position is winning for him based on his extra pawn and the activity of his pieces. My hopes for a draw rest in the fact that pieces are still on the board. I should try and get my king active in the coming moves, I believe. He might want to play something like this, potentially. So that this comes with a threat of mate. But if he plays this, I could do this, he can do this, then that's trouble. So I wouldn't want to do that. Wouldn't want to do that at all. So I'll leave it to him. I mean, I could offer him a draw. It seems like I'd be getting away with murder offering him a draw. I'm sure he probably wouldn't want to accept a draw. But how does he make progress? Let's give him time to work it out. And let's try to defend. So, okay, he brings the rook back. That gives me an opportunity to get my rook to that square, which I may want to take the opportunity to do that. What's he thinking of? He wants to bring his rook over here and then bring the rook over here. That's what he's thinking. That is definitely what he's thinking. So maybe I need to go for a queen trade here, but that loses a pawn. But it gives me this pawn. So yeah, nice idea coming here. So therefore, oh jeez, we're getting pretty low on time here. I'm gonna have to go for the queen trade / pawn trade. The idea of this move is I'm preventing his rook from getting to a8. He does have a winning position. That is the truth of the matter. My king's a bit closer to the action, but I can never really get there. He can actually get his king where it needs to go. I guess my king can get there too, taking a different route, but it's going to take a long time. I'm going to do my best. You know, depending, sometimes an extra pawn isn't enough to win. So this is going to potentially come down to my endgame knowledge. Again, if he takes the pawn, I'm going to take this pawn, which does defend these, temporarily at least. And maybe I can come here if I want to continue being as solid as possible for as long as possible. I don't have pre-moves on, otherwise I would pre-move the recapture. Maybe I should put pre-moves on. Yep. So if he takes, I'll, no, did I do the wrong thing? Did I not click on that? Did it not work? Didn't work. All right, well, whatever. All right, so now he has to think of something else. Let's see, if he just advances a pawn for argument's sake, would I want to take? Yeah, maybe. Possibly. If he advances this pawn, I'll take the queen and then sit my rook here. He might take back then, or come here. Then if I take, then we'll have a little king race, which is king would win. Again, I have a losing position here, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that is the way the cookie crumbles here. When he plays his move, I'm only going to have 52 seconds to figure out what he's doing and what I want to do in return. But if he takes my queen, I'll take back with the rook. If he takes the c2 pawn, I'm going to take the other pawn. All right, so what do I do here? Don't have a long time to figure this out, of course. I think I'm going to take the queen. It ruins his pawn structure, which is nice. Now I can't really just attack this pawn because he just defends it. I need to get my king active. I think that's what I need to do, kind of first and foremost. Nothing else there was going to be good. I thought about this and spoke about it, that he can do this and then he would win the king race to get over here. So I'm going to get a jump start on that king race immediately. Yeah, maybe I should have put a rook onto a1 first to prevent him from getting there himself. That probably would have been good too, if not better. At least now I've got 2 minutes on the clock. So yeah, perhaps here this was better. Then he was going to play this, I would think. But at least I would have controlled the file, which would be important. He would have a move like this to open up this file anyway. So it is what it is. Now, what next? If he does a move like this, I would love to push forward, but he takes the pawn here. So I think there I would have to take. Then if he takes the pawn, I take here. Life looks all right. Got to be careful. The game's not over. It's not over till it's over, even if he has a winning position now. It's not over till it's over. He's got a winning pawn or an extra pawn, pretty far advanced. And obviously the potential there to make a pass pawn, which could be decisive. If he plays this move, can I simply move my king further in towards the action? If he takes there, I can take back. And then even though he has connected pass pawns, oh man, that's dangerous. I can immediately attack. Oh yeah, no, that's not good. So if he plays a move like this, okay, he gets the rook over there. 2 minutes to work this out, if there even is anything here that can be worked out, and I don't think there really is. anything here. I don't think there's anything here at all. Sadly. This doesn't make a lot of sense. He can just come here. I suppose then I could take this pawn. He takes this one with check. I come here. Then he's going to have to move the rook out of the way in order to advance the pass pawn. And I'm going to be able to take this pawn here too. So if I do this, he would have to play this move first. Right? Then, what if I play this? He takes, I take. Don't like it. I really don't like this position. This, he comes here, sorry, here. I come here. That might be sort of my best option. Trying to keep things solid. If he plays rook a2, I'm going to play rook e2. And trying my best here, guys. And I know that it's not going to be enough, realistically, unless he makes some sort of big blunder. Unless he makes a big blunder, it's not going to be enough. Like, maybe if he plays something like this, then I get a pass pawn of my own to pressure him with a little bit. But yeah, here, I can play that move pretty quickly to gather a bit more time on the clock. But this is not desirable. So moves like this, can I even play that? Not really, because after he takes, I take, he takes, I come back to defend the check, he takes, I take, he pushes the pawn and wins the game. So after a move like this, I think I've got to get my king closer to the action, which gives him the opportunity to then push one further down. I can take. All right, interesting. I'm going to do the same. If I want to make more progress with my king, I'm going to have to play this move, which could be okay. An okay move to play. I think I'm defending pretty well, considering the circumstances. It is a lost position, so I can't beat myself up for losing in a lost position. I can beat myself up for losing that pawn earlier on in a position where it was really drawn. I would say pretty confidently it was a draw. We'll check that with the computer. But now that I'm in a lost position, losing is what you should expect. But at least putting up a solid defense is now the goal. And I think I'm doing that, causing him to have to work things out. I think he should have played b4 by now and just be pushing those pawns instead of having played king g1 or whatever his previous move was. I'm looking to play this move myself. That would be really nice. I mean, if I can win a pawn back, potentially, I don't think I can, but if I could, maybe I can salvage a draw, which would be incredible. I'd be very happy to salvage a draw. And I know this game is going on for a long time, which means the video is going on for a really long time. So I'm actually going to make another offer here. If you're still watching this video, if you are still watching this video, I want you to say the word, champagne. If you're the first person to say champagne in the comment box below, at any date, at any point in time, I will get in touch with you and I will send you a chessboard. Simple. All right, so benefits of watching, there's going to be prizes. He's got 11 minutes and 18 seconds to work out his move. I should be thinking about what he's going to do too. Let's say he just brings the king in. I could play a move like that. He can take, I take back. At that point, he sort of has to defend this pawn. So maybe something like this. But then I've got this to attack the pawn, which is defending this pawn. Then he could play something like this, though, which is really interesting. I can then take this pawn. Then he can play this and win the game. Oh, that's a continuation and a half. So this, he takes, I take. He pushes here. I come here. He pushes again. I would take that, though. That's the problem. So with that move, it's sort of a different move order, but what if I play this? I guess his threat is this at this point. So if I play this and he takes, then I take back. He wants to play this, which is very dangerous because then I can take that only at the allowance of this move. Oh, that's a good move. That is a good move. No doubt about it. That is a good move. Could consider a move like this. Get rid of the pawn. Or I could give him this and then come here. That's what I'm going to do. So after the take, I'm actually going to come here and not take straight away. Because I can see that taking straight away leads to disaster for me after b3. If I take, he takes my rook, and that's game over. And if after he takes, I take b3, if I take this pawn, he's got b2. I suppose there I've got rook e1. But then he has rook a1. And I can't win. If I take the pawn, he takes my rook. If I take the rook, he gets a queen. So taking here and allowing b3 would be an unmitigated disaster, which is why after he takes, I'm planning to go d3. Then if he comes here, I can still take. I'm trying to put up a fight. In the meantime, if he doesn't take, then I could have a pass pawn on my own, potentially. So I think he has to take. It's just that I can't take back. So I have to come here. The pawn remains undefended. And then he has to probably bring his king in. Then I guess, could I come here? So that at this move I could take. And then there'd be this move. Oh my goodness, this is insane. I could take the rook, but he takes this rook. And if I move the rook away, then that would be okay potentially. I don't think it's ever going to be okay. I think a lost position is what this is. But I am making him work for it. I am making him work for it. And if you play something like this, blocking my king out, then I can play this. He goes for the extra, well, he does what he has to do. I take, and then he would have to take back. And that would win the game too. But I would play this move. Force him to take here. And then push. And then I push. Then he gets a queen. Then I get a queen with check. And I make him continue to play. I don't know. I'm trying to put up a fight in a lost position. I'm saying it ad nauseum at this point. I'm sure that no one's watching. I'm not going to give out any more chess sets for free, but we'll see if the first two get taken. As we await our fate here. Seems that's about all we can do. So I've got my move in mind if he plays c takes d. I'm going to put the king on d3. I mean, what else is there? It's essentially, it's all over. I would wonder there if he could even sack his rook. He couldn't, but it is all over. Far and away, he's taken a lot of time that he probably doesn't need to take. I could probably resign here and be happy with my defense. But yeah, that little mistake there with the pawn, that was all it took. I mean, if I had an extra pawn here, yeah, it'd be a draw. The fact that I gave him a pawn is disappointing, but it is what it is. Now, the reason I'm not going to resign is because he is taking a lot of time. He's going to get a lot of time with each extra move, and he will eventually figure it out. So I could save a lot of time by resigning. And he plays this move instead. Now I've got to figure this out. I didn't think about this move. Now, if I take, he's probably going to want to take that. If I take there, he's going to come here. So I can't allow that. So I think I actually have to take. Other option would be to take this pawn. He comes here. I come here. He gets his queen. I come here. I don't think we can allow that. I think we kind of have to take. Then if he takes, come here. He comes here. That's going to be all over Red Rover. If I push this pawn, he's going to push this pawn. Push, push, push. And then he's going to start checking me. He'll start checking me there. So that's no good. So take is just no good. Unfortunately, this is where we resign. I don't think we need to play it out to the end. Take. If he just takes the rook, forces the recapture. He then takes this pawn. I come here. He comes here. I come. No, this is resign. That's resign. Unfortunate. There was no further defense there. I'm confident about that. It wasn't a bad game, but I made that mistake. The computer says I made 2 mistakes. Let's go through it with the computer. I think we've had ample time analyzing the game during the game. So the only thing left to do is firstly to confirm that I resigned in a totally lost position and that I didn't miss some amazing defense at this stage. What I'm imagining here, it's black by negative a lot, and it is. It's black by negative 7.9. There's nothing to do. So bishop b2, in fact, was the first error. Before then, my initial response here with a3, perfectly legitimate. c3 is also perfectly good. Developing the knight, not a problem. b4, not a problem. So it was a sound idea. Getting the bishop pair, perfectly fine. I'm sure this position would have been played many times. This is all good stuff and all solid chess. Maybe I should have castled there, would be my guess. It's actually saying I should have just taken the knight, which in hindsight makes a lot of sense. That knight turned out to be very strong. And maybe just taking it first would have been best. And either then castling and yeah, exactly. So castling here and then playing on. Instead, playing bishop b2, as I did do, was an inaccuracy, and he now has a slight advantage. So he has a slight advantage if he plays rook e8. He doesn't, he plays another good move. A castle, he still has a slight advantage. And now, interestingly, here I was feeling a lot of hate. And it says here to take on d5. Okay. Taking on d5 allows him to recapture. And then I have to pay attention to the mate thread. Is it going to say G3? No, now knight G3. Now knight G3. Okay, and he has knight E6. I would have thought he would also have knight F5. Knight F5. I can't take because mate. And well, I guess it's not really threatening a whole lot. It gives up a pawn. And if he ever actually just takes, then the bishop recaptures and the mate threat remains non-existent. So what was the issue with playing knight G3 immediately, as I did do, is that he could have played knight F4, which is what I was actually worried about. I was worried about knight F4. And I didn't really know what the response was going to be there. I think I was going to take the D4 knight. What would have been so bad with that? E takes D4. And now what do you do? Well, I would have thought now I could play F3. And in fact, you can. The problem is he's coming in with H5 and H6. Sorry, H5 and H4. He's going to knock this guy away, and then we're going to be in a world of trouble. So that is the basic issue here. Therefore, the best move after H5, how would you actually defend this? Maybe rook F2. Yep, rook F2. All right, so the immediate knight G3 was an error because of the move that I envisioned. But as I mentioned, when he played this move, I felt like his attack was extinguished, and in fact, it was. And we went back to me having a marginal advantage. And I played correctly there, or relatively correctly, and trading off these pieces was fine. F3 is good. He actually has the small advantage here, but it's roughly speaking here, it is basically a draw. In fact, it's all zeros at this point. All zeros at this point, which is what I thought, and I was fairly happy with. And here I gave a check, still all zeros. I think here what I should have done is just return. Had I just returned, I'm assuming it's still all zeros. No, it's not, because here he gets to play F5. Against F5, I would have taken. He can take with either rook. Let's say he takes with this one. Here again, I would have probably just retreated the rook. Okay. And now he plays Queen E5. Okay, I would have retreated the queen, which would be a huge mistake, unfortunately. So then what was the move? How do I was in a completely drawn position. How do I draw? I have to play A6, which I'd considered. Okay, letting him take, but taking here. I guess. Yeah. But unfortunately, I gave him the biggest advantage, or quite a big advantage. And from there, it's very hard to do anything. So I'm going to leave it there. The analysis is what it is. In terms of a lesson I can take from this, ultimately, there's one other thing I'd like to check, actually. And that was before I castled. Give the computer a chance to catch up. I mean, I could have got the draw even at this point. That's really unfortunate. Queen A2 was a draw. I would think Queen B3 is also a draw. What would be wrong with Queen B3? Yeah, also a draw. Queen A2 is a draw, but it's just here. Like I would again imagine this is a draw. It's not because of F5. Really interesting. What about this? I don't think this would be good. Precisely for this reason. Ruining my pawns for no reason. Okay, but what I want to do is go back to say here.